Hello, and welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joseph Arthur, PMW's multimedia editor. I've got a heck of a show coming up for you today, folks, one I've been really excited about for quite some time. Joining me up top, we've got PMW's editor, Robin Langford, otherwise known as our head honcho, as I recall towards the end of this recording, after having a little bit of a mental blank, much to my chagrin and Robin's enjoyment. We talk about PMW's Performance Marketing Roadmap, which is our 4-part subscriber-only series that endeavours to answer the 4 biggest questions performance marketers have been asking. Now, we spoke to over 250 experts for these series of exposés. We did some of our own independent research as well, and I don't want to reveal too much because we'll save that for my discussion with Robin, which you'll hear in just a moment. But before I get to that, joining me after my chat with Robin is Moubayed. He's the co-founder and co-CEO of digital out-of-home specialists, Veridooh. Now, this is a really interesting chat that I have with Mo for a couple of reasons. Namely, we dive into how programmatic and digital out-of-home has impacted out-of-home advertising more broadly, and whether or not digital out-of-home is the next big performance marketing channel. Mo reveals any trends we should be aware of, what upcoming events like the Summer of Sport might have to say about the space, and whether or not there's scope for programmatic and digital out-of-home to link up with things like retail media. But another element of the discussion, and one that I really enjoyed personally, I imagine your listeners will as well, is we talk about the inception of Veridooh as a company. Because like most startups, it's got a story of a roller coaster story behind it, many ups and downs. But this one in particular is a startup story that isn't to be missed. So look forward to that and enjoy the show. Robin Langford, hello and welcome back to the studio. How are you today?
Hi Joe, thanks for having me. Good today. Nice sunny afternoon.
Almost. We have a habit of constantly touching on the weather every time I have someone in studio. It's just become our thing. It shows how obsessed we all are on the weather out here in London. And you say a nice sunny afternoon, and it kind of has been in spurts, but you know, we're on the weather. We might as well get into it now. It's been a little bit up and down, but I think maybe I'm saying that because I'm fresh off the plane back from California where it was 25 and sunny.
I was wondering where you're going with that segue there, Joe, and you needed to get in the fact that you've been in Mountain View, California with your colleagues at Google.
Do I detect a hint of jealousy, Robin?
Not at all. It looked like a fantastic place, the Googleplex. Was it everything that you'd imagined it to be?
It was, to be honest. I think the people out there at Googleplex, they're working very hard, but they certainly have an office environment that's conducive to getting the best out of them. I think it was very amenable to anything anyone might like. There's a bit more of an extended column on that if I could be so bold as to plug my first PMW editorial column. You can go and find that on the website, which I've aptly named From the Touchline, which wasn't one from ChatGPT, but there was a little bit of ChatGPT in there spitballing. But today, Robin, we're here to talk about the performance roadmap, aren't we?
Yeah, the performance marketing roadmap is PMW's most ambitious project yet, and we're very pleased to be launching it this week.
Now, it's subscriber-only content, I believe, and at time of listening, once this is live, it will be up live on the website, available to our subscribers. So tell us a little bit about it. It's in a few different parts. I myself don't know very much about it. I'm quite intrigued.
Yeah, it's been a top secret project. Even our own journalists haven't been knowing about it. But it's not just your common or garden report. It's got interactive elements. It looks beautiful. And we've spent a huge amount of time and done a lot of research for this. We've done our own internal research. We've interviewed 250 performance marketers to get this report out. And the key thing is, anyone who works in this industry will know there are quite a lot of industry reports out and really great high-level stuff. But at Performance Marketing World, we know our readers those reports don't always answer the questions that they have. And so what we've really done with this report is set ourselves a goal of 4 questions that performance marketers really need to know for the year ahead. And we've tried to produce things that just you won't find anywhere else. And it's geared towards this particular part of the marketing industry. And so with performance marketers, you really need to be about media planning ahead. So we've produced an interactive living timeline that is going to be updated every 2 weeks. I've made that bold claim.
Set yourself that task.
I know I'm on hiding for nothing for this one, because we do know that, as your friends at Google have let us know, that often timelines can change. But that's the whole reason we've made this roadmap, is because we wanted to help people visualize the coming year ahead and all those key dates, whether that's Google's Chrome deprecation, whether it's the next update of Apple's iOS, which can often be a massive deal to marketers if you remember the ATT change of 2021. Things like, when are the big shopping days? I mean, we've made a rough estimate in this report for when Prime Day and Prime Day 2 are going to land. So for anyone who's planning your marketing this year, you can really think ahead to see how all these things are going to merge together. And of course, some of the big global events, like you've got the Olympics and Paralympic Games, you've got the Euros, you've got the massive US presidential election waiting for us at the end of the year. And now we, courtesy of Rishi Sunak, we now know that the UK election is going to happen on the 4th of July.
4th of July. I believe the 4th of July.
That is
nod to our
correct.
American neighbours, perhaps.
Exactly, it is that. And for marketers, we've made it really easy for them to visualise how all these things come together, and it will be updated regularly. That's one aspect of this report, but it's in 4 parts.
Now, I know, as we said, it's under lock and key, and it is subscriber-only content, but let's sell this a little bit to our listeners who may not yet be subscribers. I know you can't reveal too much, but I've got my journalist hat on here, Robin. I'm going to try and get a little bit out of you. You mentioned 4 questions that all marketers want answered, and I assume that's sort of the breakdown of the 4 parts. Yeah. Can you reveal what those questions that we've sought out to answer in this report are? Yeah,
it's 4 T's, really. It's timeline, tech, talent and terrain, and I'm really glad I remembered those as I send them off.
Put you on the spot.
So I mentioned the timeline before. We've also gone with tech. What does the modern marketer's tech stack look like? It's an incredibly complex landscape out there. Should you be having more? Should you be growing your tech stack? Should you be trying to shrink it? Should you be reviewing your tech stack at the moment? And we've asked 250 performance marketers what are the 5 things they couldn't live without that they're working with every day. And we've also asked whether they've developed in-house tools, whether they're developing their own AI and things like that. And we've developed a massive word cloud and also what I've called an anatomy of a tech stack, which is we've gone and looked at one particular agency, and they've revealed all the different tools and the different functions they have, whether that's for search, social listening, and all these different things. So it's a good way for people to perhaps benchmark their own current tech stack, see what's out there, see what they haven't heard of before, and it's some really surprising results. There's one particularly really big thing that I can't reveal right now, but something is really changing the tech stack world. And one person we spoke to for this particular chapter was Scott Brinker, who some of our listeners might know is called the godfather of MarTech. He might not, he's quite a humble person, but some people call him that.
That's a cool nickname. What was the one I kept trying to dub you, the nickname?
I'm not going to help you, Joe.
It's not coming to my mind right now.
No, I'm very glad it's not. I mean, you'll probably get it in at the end of the podcast, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, Scott Brinker spoke to us, and he said a lot of marketers' great questions are still going unanswered, but he's given us some very good reasons why in the report as to why they might be answered pretty soon. Mm-hmm. And the 3rd chapter is looking at talent, and that is all about that constant battle, particularly in performance marketing, between generalists and specialists. And a fascinating thing we found when we've interviewed all these people in performance marketing is that specialist generalist thing is merging into something altogether different.
Talent's a really big one, actually, because it's something that consistently goes a little bit under the radar and gets lost sometimes among the smoke and mirrors of the sort of AI in particular, and adtech, always comes to the forefront at the moment. Data and privacy spends a lot of time at the forefront. But marketing in particular, even to this day, is still all about the people. So talent's a really, really interesting one there. What about the 4th T, Robin? What have we got there?
The 4th T is terrain. What is the shifting
That can mean a lot of things, terrain.
Can mean a lot of things, yeah. But for this one, we've taken it to mean how is user behaviour changing? What is the agency landscape looking like? And where's ad spend going? Ad spend's fascinating right now because we've seen from the latest walk data that paid social has overtaken search for ad spend. That happened at some point at the end of last year, 2023. And that's huge because paid social was the dominant form of digital advertising for such a long time. And one of the big areas for ad investment we found in Western markets particularly is what we're calling the Temu effect, which is these huge new brands in China, whether it's Shein or Temu, some of these massive like Amazon type places, are investing a lot of money in Western markets to grow their brand. You might have seen these adverts yourself.
Which is very un-APAC of them.
Yes, and that's because a lot of investment is actually falling in APAC, but we explore that deeper in the report. But a lot of this growth in the Western markets is being propped up by some of these massive Asian brands and tech giants moving into that space. There's a lot more in this report, and we've spoken to a huge number of experts to make sure we get as much value for our readers.
No, you've sold it to me. So that's one. You've legitimately piqued my interest there, and it's one I can't wait to dive in and read myself. And I imagine our listeners back at home feel the same. So tell us, how can they find it, Robin, and how can they get access to this special report?
This will be in our subscriber only section, and we'll also be teasing out different parts of the story that this is telling us over the next few weeks. So your readers will be able to see that there. But it's on a subscriber only section. It's available as a standalone market report, or for all PMW subscribers as a bolt-on if people are interested in having an extra package. But we've got a whole plethora of new stuff coming out on PMW over the next year.
The baby child of our premium content editor, Jyoti Rambai, working there in tandem with PNW's head honcho, Robin Langford. It came back to me.
I thought you'd forgotten, Joe.
Nickname.
Stop trying to make that happen.
Never going to forget. Robin, thanks very much for joining me and revealing a little bit about what we can expect in the performance marketing roadmap. I'm sure our listeners can't wait to dive in. In the meantime, we're going to move along to our interview with Moubayed from Veridooh. Robin, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Joe.
Moubayed, thanks very much for joining me today on the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. You've travelled near and far to get here. How are you doing?
I'm good. A little bit jet lagged, but nothing we can't deal with.
Nothing we can't deal with, and deal with it we shall. We're here a little bit to talk about out of home, specifically digital out of home, which is an element of marketing that's a little bit newer to the game, I suppose. And you, as an expert, Veridooh, you guys are the digital out of home experts in a lot of ways. Tell me a little bit about the out of home advertising landscape and how it's changed over the last few years with the introduction of more programmatic measures and the digital element.
Absolutely. Out of home's been digitizing over the past 10 years. And you know, if you think back in the day, we're thinking about posters and paintings on billboards. Over the past 5 to 10 years, that's really been digitizing at a rapid rate. And so if you look at Australia and the UK, today, 65 and 73% respectively of the total out-of-home revenue is being generated from digital out-of-home. And so Australia and the UK are definitely further ahead than other markets, whereas in the US, it's around 35%, but we're seeing more and more panels being digitized. And I think that's just going to help the out-of-home industry grow. And then secondly, in recent years, programmatic has really kicked off. You know, it's been bubbling away for a few years, but last year we've heard statistics around some out-of-home companies generating 6 to 8% of their revenue from programmatic out-of-home. And I think the future of programmatic out-of-home is, based on what I hear, is going to be bigger and bigger.
Elaborate for me a little bit on exactly what programmatic means, because it's a bit of a buzzword that gets thrown around in the industry, and it's not one I'm convinced everybody understands. So as someone who's an expert in that field, tell me in your words exactly what programmatic advertising and programmatic out-of-home means.
Absolutely. I think it would be good to compare how out-of-home is traditionally bought. Out-of-home is traditionally bought through an IO, direct with the media owner. You know, that could be called traditional buying or direct buying. Whereas now, programmatic out-of-home, similar to programmatic online advertising, online buying, we're seeing demand side platforms come into place that are auctioning between supply side platforms. So we have two platforms where the supply side is holding all the inventory, and the demand side is really generating that demand and really auctioning off impressions. And so if, traditional digital out of home, you bought assets like a panel or a play, now in programmatic, you're buying impressions. So how many people saw it? And I think there's a lot of automation in programmatic. There's some great targeting in programmatic as well. I think both will survive and exist in the future, but it really is a different way of buying.
So when you think about it from an advertising perspective, the traditional billboard campaigns, they're very creative driven. They've traditionally been quite hard to measure. Things like footfall, impressions, as you bring up there on the programmatic side, it's a little bit murky and opaque. And I think people are still coming to terms with the idea of looking at an out-of-home campaign as something that sort of generates tangible results, and there's very clear metrics for what works and what doesn't. So talk to me about how programmatic and digital out-of-home can drive better outcomes and ROI. Is it truly as tangibly measurable as it bills itself to be?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, when we look at measurement, we really need to understand what the goals are. And traditionally, out-of-home has been a brand building medium. And some might say the only and last standing brand building medium that does it truly well. I think in recent years, with the digitization, we now can overlay more technology and data over digital out-of-home and programmatic out-of-home and even static out-of-home. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're looking, if you're looking after a true ROI, that has become easier. Is it a perfect solution? No, but I don't think any advertising medium has a perfect solution to figure out ROI, right? We've seen the changes and ways that marketers look at ROI, and there are different ways to do it. I think we're getting better, and we're better than ever right now, and I think it's going to get even better in the future.
Let's talk about this landscape a little bit more, because it's one you've been a part of since 2019. Correct. Now, I got that right?
Yes.
Now, talk to me about the company you co-founded, Veridooh.
Yes.
Because you guys are sort of the digital programmatic out-of-home experts. You provide independent verification of campaigns. So Correct. You're sort of saying, here's your measurement. We're going to give you tangible metrics to say how your campaign's performing, whether that be good, bad, or otherwise. Just walk me through Veridooh's journey. What was it like bringing a startup into the world in 2019 in particular? For those of you listening at home, you'll understand that timeline got very rocky pretty quickly if you were trying to introduce a startup in 2019. So just walk me through that process. I'm sure there's an interesting story.
Absolutely. And I think it'd be good to understand how Veridooh came about.
Sure.
Me and my co-founder, we wanted to launch our own digital out-of-home network in Australia. We wanted to put digital signs on top of taxis and Ubers. As any good entrepreneur does, you put everything into place, but before you spend a lot of capital buying these signs, you try to go and pre-sell it. And so we went around to all the agencies to pre-sell the digital signs on top of the taxi, so the ad space. And as we went around, every agency continued to ask us, how do I know if my ad played? This simple question, how do I know my ad was even there? And I think we heard that question so many times, maybe because it was on top of a taxi or a car and you wouldn't be able to take a photo because that's how you did it at the time, taking a photo, or getting a media owner to provide you a proof of play report. But we had that question come around so many times. I think it got really interesting when we pitched to an agency and they said to us, well, look, if you can prove that the ad's played, we'll be your first client. And that was really, really interesting. So we went away and built this technology for ourselves.
So you pivoted a little bit away from what you were doing in terms of we're sort of selling ad space or looking to fill ad space. And now you're thinking there's actually a question out there that needs to be solved, which is how can this ad space be measured?
Exactly.
So you've gone out and become an ad tech company.
Exactly. And it wasn't at that exact point that happened. So we went away to build it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we came back to pitch to the agency again, still trying to sell the ad space, right? And we're like, look, we can now do it. Here's the ad space.
When you have your idea, you're just hell-bent on going forward with it.
Exactly. And after we demoed this rudimentary tracking technology to them, trying to sell the ad space, they said, well, look, we spend millions of dollars a year on out-of-home advertising. Could you track and verify that for us instead? And I think coming down that lift after that meeting, thinking, oh, hold on, did we just sell the ad space, or are we doing something else here? And, it became super clear that we'd found a challenge that a lot of the agencies were experiencing, a lot of advertisers were experiencing it. We'd found an agency and a client who was willing to work with us to develop out the metrics. We realized that this problem wasn't just in Australia, it was a global problem, and the type of technology that we'd built meant it was scalable everywhere. So we could scale this all around the world. And I think me and Jeremy were super focused on solving challenges, and this was a new challenge, something that no one had ever solved before in the way that we had solved it. And we love building things that have never been built before. So, it was a clear answer for us that we should definitely chase this.
So you identified your direction to chase. There's a clear USP that comes along with it.
Yes.
There's clearly a big global problem that needed to be solved, and
Yes.
that is the measurement of out-of-home campaigns. The pandemic hits.
Yes.
What's that process like? Because you're obviously out here abroad and you're talking about Veridooh exists in Australia, in the UK, expansions through the US.
Yes.
How have you gotten to that point with the pandemic in the middle of that?
It was really interesting. So once again, no one had seen what we'd created before. So there was a lot of education in 2019. We won our first group agency deal with Group M around September 2019 in Australia. And then quickly after we won Omnicom Media Group in Australia in 2020. Now we have two of the largest group agencies.
Two massive agencies on board.
And Jan is our official launch date, Jan 2020, and we get amazing traction in Jan, Feb, and March. And then I think by about mid-March or April, 60% of all out-of-home gets wiped out in Australia. And, retrospectively, at the time, was I worried? Maybe not. I think we were growing so quick at that point in time when I had a moment to sit down and think about it. I was able to reflect and say, okay, Jan, Feb, March, that was huge. That really gave us confidence to know that if we weren't in lockdown, this thing would be going nuts.
And in that time, I remember I was in Australia at that exact moment in time you're talking about as well. And I think this is something that was across the globe. You didn't really know when things like lockdowns were going to end.
Exactly.
Everyone initially was saying, it's got weeks, it's got months, it'll get warm in the summer,
right.
Everything's going to blow through. And obviously that's not the case. But that sort of mitigates some concern because you just were telling yourself, let's just be prepared for when things open back up and we'll be ready to go.
Yes, that's exactly how we were thinking. We'd had 3 months and it really gave us the confidence to double down. So me and Jeremy had bootstrapped this up until this point in time. So, to put more of our money into this, seeing those numbers meant, we've got more confidence to really invest into this even more. And interestingly enough, if COVID hadn't happened at that point in time, we wouldn't have taken the opportunity to rebuild our proof of concept. So if you'd built your proof of concept in the first time round, if we kept on going, that proof of concept maybe wouldn't have been able to handle the scale that we were about to have.
Things might have happened a bit quickly.
Exactly. So we went back and rebuilt it to make it more scalable. And throughout COVID, we rebuilt it twice, to deal with the scale. And it allowed us to take a moment of pause for us. And we weren't a huge team. So we weren't like a lot of companies who'd hired a lot of people and then were really struggling through that period. We were really lean, and we're still lean to this day. So we're really lean. And what we decided to do was hire during that time, mainly because there was a lot of really good people in market, right? So we thought to ourselves, look, as a startup, having good people is so important. If COVID hadn't happened, maybe there wouldn't have been so many good people available in the market at that point in time, and we would have really struggled to hire. And so obviously I'm looking at all the positives here. But, did I have sleepless nights? Of course. Everything that you've built up until that point in time could have disappeared, right?
But I guess it's the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, entrepreneurs truly are the most optimistic people.
Yeah.
going around because they just, an idea is born and all of a sudden it becomes their entire lives. And you hedge every bet you've got on it. And again, it's just you reach failure and failure and failure, but you just keep going. You just keep going until you hit that success. And I think the clever thing you've done there is it's when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade.
Exactly.
You know, when there's always an opportunity among threats. And obviously, the writing's on the wall. You've got a global pandemic. You don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But what you have is a lot of people that have been made redundant, perhaps.
Yes.
They're out of work. They're looking for something.
Yes.
You've got something to offer. There you go. You hire some great talent.
Exactly.
And then you just rescale the business so that if and when things do open up, it's ready to go. So coming out of the pandemic,
Yes.
what happened?
We didn't let the pandemic sort of stand in our way either. We knew we wanted to go international also. And
Ambitious.
Right. And we thought to ourselves, you know what? Maybe because everyone's in lockdown, we can do internationally from Sydney. Right? Think about that for a second. No, even if I was overseas, no one would be meeting me anyway. So as long as I could shift my hours, you know, it didn't matter where I was in the world. And
everyone was working remotely at that point.
Right. So we saw that as an opportunity to say, how could we maybe win a deal globally, an agency deal globally or in another market from Australia? And so we started working on the UK to get that happening. And we ran a pitch from Australia and we won it. I think that's pretty amazing. And we were able to win it during lockdowns in Australia. No one's allowed to travel. And then the moment the market opened up, I picked up and I came straight over to the UK to roll it out. And so once again, maybe these lockdowns helped the little lean startup go a little bit bigger than what we could have.
It certainly gave you the time to hire the right people, to invest the right amount of time in creating a product that was going to scale and it was going to work when it was brought out into the world. And then, of course, you've just got to be agile and creative as entrepreneurs to be able to react to, well, if everyone's stuck at home working remotely, my sort of potential audience is no longer just Australia, it's everybody.
Exactly.
All I've got to do is stay up a little bit later, wake up a little bit earlier. So if we pivot away from Veridooh's story as a company itself, and I want to look more on your own and what you've taken away in hindsight to Veridooh's obviously still expanding and you're still on your journey. But as far as startups go, you've been around almost just about half a decade now.
Yes.
So it's a good opportunity to sort of look back at where you were to what you've become into, you know, a thriving business at this point. What have you learned as an entrepreneur and a co-founder of a startup? What's it taught you personally? Any real line in the sand moments where you think you know, you've made a real memory there? You've learned a real life lesson. Anything that our listeners can take away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think belief is a key ingredient. Belief that you're doing the right thing, and belief in your product, and self-belief is very important, right? I think the moment you believe what you're doing is right, a lot of things fall into place, right? I think that's important. Secondly, people say resilience. I like to say, I like to reframe that and actually say enjoying, you know, the good times and the bad times, and you know, taking a step back and thinking, I'm on a roller coaster. And if I was on a roller coaster, it's super scary when we're on the way down. But overall, I'm really enjoying this ride. And if you can step back and say, right now, something bad has happened, but I'm okay with it because bad things happen. And I'm actually enjoying learning about myself, learning about how I'm going to approach this challenge, then the whole roller coaster becomes super enjoyable. So, you know, sometimes people say, oh, it's a roller coaster and that's a negative thing. I think humans love this exhilaration of up and down. And if you can take a step back and say, yep, things are bad right now, but I still enjoy it, then you're going to really have a great time throughout the whole process. And you have the ability to go the distance.
It comes back to that first thing you said, belief. Belief in something will take you a long way. And I guess just maintaining faith through thick and thin. But then, of course, that final point, it's up to you how you respond to things.
Exactly.
And if you try and frame things as positively as possible, then fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
That's the best way to go about it. What about the future for not only Veridooh, but programmatic and digital out of home in general? What kind of trends are we seeing that we can look forward to in the future? What's going to change 6 months, 1 year, 5 years from now?
Look, I think out of home has an opportunity to really take a large market share.
Summer of
other
sport in
mediums.
particular,
Yeah.
like the Olympics. The
Well, that's
Paralympics,
super short term.
the
I'm thinking
Euros.
about in the medium to long term. So in the super short term, there is great opportunities around what's happening in summer over the next few months, with the Olympics and all the sports. I think that's, people, especially in London.
Yeah.
If you go around London, everyone's out and about in summer. People are going out to watch the games. It's really like nothing else I've seen in other parts of the world. So there's a huge opportunity for out-of-home advertising over the summer here in London. But I think there's an opportunity here for out-of-home to really be the most trusted channel medium across all mediums, right? If you look at the issues going on with like online with ad fraud and MFAs and all
Privacy
that
is
sort of
a
stuff.
massive thing at the moment.
There's a bunch of issues there. They command a lot of money from advertisers, whereas out of home is sitting at like, 4 or 5% of an advertiser's spend, and we don't have those issues, right? And I think with all the new technology that's coming into play, in particular, I think verification, what we do is a part of that. I'm not saying it's the silver bullet. It's a part of that. We really could be the most trusted channel across all and start to shift spends from online TV into out of home. And I think that's super exciting as a vision. If you want to go deeper into what kind of things sort of will help that happen, I think verification, measurement, closing the loop with attribution and ROI, all of that sort of stuff will definitely help it happen. But I think out of home has something that online doesn't have, and it's that impact. When you're walking down the street and this beautiful sign with amazing creative, I think if you can get the creative right, then it's going to be second to none, right?
Yeah, and it's absolutely, as you say, free from a lot of the regulatory challenges that we see in other aspects of the industry. One interesting thing I've been postulating on, and it's what about the emergence of retail media,
Yes.
particularly in-store retail media? That seems like there's scope to sort of link up with digital out-of-home in that sense. Is that something you're top of mind for the future?
Absolutely. I think if I get this number right, we might need to fact check this, but $100 billion maybe for retail media globally, potentially.
We might have to fact check it, but it's certainly a $1 billion investment industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the majority of that is still online.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunity for out of home is all the screens that you see in the Tesco's.
The retailers, Co-op now has its own retail media network. We've actually spoken to them before as well. Morrison's here in the UK has launched one too, a media network. So It's happening in these out-of-home spaces.
Absolutely. And I think we could fact check this as well, but I think of that 100 billion, only 1% is in-store on out-of-home panels.
Mm-hmm. So there's scope for growth,
there's a
regardless
lot of
of what
scope
the
for growth.
specific figures are.
And we know seeing an ad just before purchase is a huge contributor to purchase choice. And so, yes, there's a lot of money going into retail media. There's a huge opportunity for out of home to really own those screens inside and just outside of the shopping centres and really grow that.
Now, before we move on to PMW's famous Resell Me a Pen challenge,
Yes.
which I know you're super excited for, as all the guests are. I think I say that every week. I just wanted to talk about Veridooh and some of the companies you've worked with. Is there any case study that jumps out at you, or is there any particular client that you can speak to where you think, wow, what a moment, what an opportunity we've brought for them, and just anything that sort of our entrepreneurs listening, anyone who's got a nugget of an idea or a marketer who thinks one day they want to go out and create their own thing. Have you had a moment in time these last 5 years where you've assisted a client in a way that you thought, wow, what we're doing is really, really great?
Look, I never thought Google would pay me for anything. I think that's a pretty good one.
None of us ever do.
Definitely our client list is very impressive. Google, Amazon, McDonald's, KFC, Pepsi, the biggest advertisers in the world pay us today to independently verify their out-of-home campaigns. And the majority of them make us mandatory. So we're becoming that hygiene factor. That's one. I think maybe not at a client level, but at an industry level. And once again, I'm not saying Veridooh or independent verification is a silver bullet to this, but if we look at some data pre-mass adoption of independent verification in Australia, the industry was growing around 10% year on year. Post-mass adoption of independent verification in Australia, the industry is growing around 20% year on year. And I'm not here to say that's because of independent verification, but we're definitely a factor
contributing,
in that, right? And if you look at other markets, Australia is one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing, mature industry, out-of-home industry in the world. And then I would say, a lot of the times our vision is to help grow out-of-home, right? That's our vision. So when we see brands start to enter into out-of-home because of the independent verification that we provide, I think there's about 10 that I can think of that never spent in out-of-home or paused spending in out-of-home. And the fact that we could give them this data and this transparency and this accountability brought them back into out-of-home. I think that was a big moment for me. And so I guess what I'm saying, the effect that we've had on the industry rather than on a particular client really stands out. If you look at our top 50 clients, I think 75% of them, since when they've started using us, have increased their spend in out-of-home on average, I think by about 60%. That's a huge number for the industry, right? And if we can replicate that here in the UK, in the USA, globally, I think it's going to be a great outcome.
Yeah, so you're really reimagining the way marketers put together their budgets and reallocating ad spend based off of the work you're doing. And I can only imagine how rewarding that must be. Certainly fosters scope for competition, though, because you've got just a growing sector at this point. So
yes,
you're going to have other tasty companies up there nipping at your heels at some point, I'm sure. And it's something that we'll look forward to seeing unfold in the digital out-of-home space. Before we wrap up, Mo, and I'm just conscious of time here, we do need to get to the Resell Me 10 challenge.
I just want to talk about competition for a second.
Sure.
Because I love competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think competition...
You have to as an entrepreneur.
I think competition makes you a better person and a better business. But we've got patents in a lot of countries. So that's something they're going to have to come up against.
Just enough competition. A little bit of competition to keep a healthy economy, plenty of ad spend, but not too much.
Make sure you don't infringe our patents. I think it's
There you go, listeners, any entrepreneurs who want to enter the space, the gauntlet has been laid down. All right, Mo, we know you can sell digital out of home.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. Resell me something a little harder to sell. What's the out-of-date product or service you're going to have a crack at?
Look, on my way here, I was thinking about what is something super hard to sell. I love a challenge. You probably figured that out by now, Joe. And something that I think is really hard to sell because there's not a lot of benefits to it is dial-up internet. So I'm going to try to sell dial-up internet to you.
Amazing, Mo. You got 60 seconds to resell me dial-up internet, and your time starts now.
Do you suffer from bad sleep and slow performance during your workday?
How did you know?
Yeah, I can see it in your eyes.
I'm a journalist.
Well, that's probably because you've had your Wi-Fi on all night and those EMFs are affecting the way you sleep. There are studies right now that show having EMFs on in your bedroom or on all the time will affect how you sleep and perform the next day. Well, there is a new technology called dial-up internet that will only turn on when you dial in. So the rest of the time, while you're in your home, working at home, and now sleeping at home and working at home now, you'll be rid of all the EMFs so you can have a good night's sleep and wake up the next day ready to smash it.
And smash it indeed, didn't we, Mo? 44 seconds, 15 remaining on the clock. Well and truly under time. Always hand out bonus points for that. Couple of points I love there. Appealing to your audience, asking a couple of questions.
Yes.
Your safe bet with a journalist is bad sleeper. It's basically requisite for the job. But the good thing there is actually, you've raised quite a good point that I totally forgot about, is EMFs and sleep. I mean, it's like our own little Huberman lab we've got here.
Yes.
But the other point there is it saves a little bit of cash as well. You're not always currently running your electricity bill in the background for your phone that's charging and it's already on 100% because you've just left the electricity and the internet on.
Exactly.
You're getting notifications throughout the night.
That's
dial-up internet. You're off the grid when you haven't dialed up.
If you gave me 90 seconds, I would have got to the mental health issues of being connected to the internet all the time. Right?
There we go. There's scope for do it, Mo. Another really enjoyable resell me a pen. I think that's a great crack at dial-up internet, which is a real tough sell, but I think you did as good a job there as you could. Listen, we're out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Can't thank you enough for joining me. We know you're a super, super busy man and enjoy the rest of your travels. And I look forward to seeing what Veridooh brings to the market next. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Joseph.
And that concludes this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Big thank you to Robin Langford for joining me on the show this week to discuss the performance marketing roadmap. Again, that is available to all PMW subscribers as of right now. So go out there and get it. Also, a big thank you to Moubayed, the co-founder and co-CEO of Veridooh, for just a really enjoyable discussion about all things programmatic out of home and digital out of home and whether or not it's the next big performance marketing channel. Is there scope for it to tie in with retail media? But as I said at the beginning of the show, what a story for a startup and a really, really inspiring one. So I hope you got a lot out of that. I certainly did. And it's one that's left me feeling inspired and ready to go out in the world and make a difference and make lemonade from lemons. So big thank you to Mo for sharing that inspiring story, and best of luck to him and Veridooh for the future. It'll be really exciting to see where that company goes. But as always, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you, the loyal listener, for tuning in each fortnight. As you do, please, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice. And if you're so inclined, leave a positive rating and review. That's all from me on this episode. I'll be back in just over a fortnight's time for a bit of a different podcast, a little bit of a teaser for you. PMW will be on the ground, like many of you, I imagine, at Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity. And we're going to be doing a very short mini-series of podcasts while we're out there, with the first one coming at some stage, whenever I get a moment to edit during that week of Cannes Lions. Hopefully we'll have a couple of episodes coming your way, but sit tight with bated breath for those. That'll be a really, really exciting Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity podcast mini-series. It'll be my first time out there in the south of France. And if you will be out there yourselves, get in touch. Come and say hi, and who knows, maybe you'll find yourself contributing to an episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. You never know. In the meantime, have an amazing week, and bye for now.